The courthouse smelled like tobacco, sweat, and the particular kind of hatred that festers in small frontier towns when they finally get a chance to destroy someone they've feared for years. Cole Mercer sat in the defendant's chair with his wrists chained to the armrests, his body betraying him in ways no opponent ever had. The fever had started 3 days ago, the morning after the shooting, and it had turned his skin the color of old parchment. His shirt clung to him with sweat despite the October chill seeping through the courthouse walls. But his eyes, those ice-chipped gray eyes that had stared down claims jumpers, card cheats, and hired guns across half the Montana territory, those hadn't dimmed one damn bit. "Mr. Mercer," Judge Cornelius Thorne said from the bench, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man who'd sentenced 17 men to hang in the past 5 years. "You stand accused of the murder of James William Dalton on the night of October 14th, 1876. How do you plead?" Cole didn't answer immediately. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of it settle over the packed courtroom like snow before an avalanche. 50-odd townspeople crammed into the gallery, most of them standing because there weren't enough benches. They'd come to watch him burn. He could feel their hunger for it. "Not guilty," Cole said finally, his voice rough as creek gravel but steady as bedrock. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone in the back, sounded like Harvey Pritchard from the grain exchange, muttered loud enough to carry, "Lying son of a bitch." Judge Thorne's gavel cracked like a gunshot. "Order! I will have order in this proceeding, or I will clear this courtroom." The prosecutor, a rail-thin vulture of a man named Douglas Kinsey, rose from his table with the kind of theatrical precision that told Cole this bastard had been rehearsing. Kinsey had ridden in from Helena specifically for this trial, which meant someone with money had decided Cole Mercer needed to hang proper and legal. The territorial governor, maybe. Or one of the mining companies whose claims Cole had bought out from under them when their prospectors got too drunk and too stupid at his faro tables. "Your Honor," Kinsey began, buttoning his coat with the careful movements of a man who believed in ceremony, "the prosecution will demonstrate beyond any shadow of doubt that the defendant, Cole Mercer, did willfully and with malice aforethought murder Mr. James Dalton in cold blood outside the Silver Dollar Saloon. We will show that, Mr. Mercer has built an empire of vice in this town through intimidation, violence, and the systematic destruction of any man who dares challenge his authority." Cole almost laughed. Empire. The Silver Dollar was 3 rooms and a collapsing balcony held up by hope and stolen lumber. But he kept his face blank, the same expression he wore when holding a weak hand in a high-stakes game. "We will prove," Kinsey continued, warming to his performance now, "that James Dalton was nothing more than a young man seeking honest entertainment and fair play. And when he dared to question the defendant's methods, when he dared to speak truth in the face of tyranny, Cole Mercer executed him in the street like a dog." The courtroom erupted. Men shouted agreement. Women clutched their shawls tighter, their faces hard with righteous anger. Cole watched them all with the detached curiosity of a man studying a rattlesnake den from safe distance. Except there was no safe distance anymore. The serpents had him surrounded. Judge Thorne hammered his gavel again. "Mr. Kinsey, you'll save your eloquence for closing arguments. Call your first witness." "The prosecution calls Mr. Edwin Talbot." Cole's jaw tightened. Talbot. Of course it would be Talbot. The man who shuffled forward to take the witness stand was short and round, with the kind of soft hands that had never known real work and the kind of calculating eyes that made up for it by knowing exactly where to stick the knife. Edwin Talbot owned the assay office and held shares in 3 of the territorial mining operations. He'd been trying to buy the Silver Dollar for 2 years, and Cole had told him to go to hell twice and meant it both times. The bailiff, a thick-shouldered deputy named Grafton, who Cole had once caught cheating at poker, swore Talbot in with obvious satisfaction. Kinsey approached the witness stand like a man greeting an old friend. "Mr. Talbot, please tell the court where you were on the night of October 14th. Talbot settled into the chair, smoothing his vest. "I was at the Silver Dollar Saloon, having dinner and observing the gaming tables, as is my occasional custom." "And did you witness the events that led to Mr. Dalton's death?" "I did, sir. I witnessed the entire sorry affair from start to tragic finish." Cole felt the fever pulse behind his eyes, turning the courtroom edges soft and dreamlike. He forced himself to focus. This was the dangerous moment, when the lies started to crystallize into something that sounded like truth. "Tell us what you saw, Mr. Talbot." Talbot took a breath, playing to the gallery now. James Dalton was at the faro table that evening. A friendly game, nothing excessive. He was playing fair, keeping his bets modest, enjoying himself the way young men do. Modest. Cole remembered Jimmy Dalton's bets that night. Reckless, desperate, the kind of wagering that came from a man trying to fill a hole that money couldn't fix. But he said nothing. Not yet. "Go on," Kinsey prompted. The game progressed normally for perhaps an hour. Then Mr. Dalton placed what we call a dead bet, a wager on a card that had already been played. The dealer, a young woman in Mr. Mercer's employ, called it invalid. Mr. Dalton disagreed. He believed the card was still in play. And what happened then? Talbot's voice dropped, heavy with manufactured sorrow. Mr. Mercer himself came to the table. He was aggressive, confrontational. He told Mr. Dalton that if he didn't like the house rules, he could leave. But when Mr. Dalton tried to collect what he believed were his legitimate winnings, Mr. Mercer became enraged. Every word was a splinter under a fingernail, small, sharp, and precisely placed. Cole's hands flexed against the chains. "Did Mr. Mercer threaten Mr. Dalton?" Kinsey asked. "He did more than threaten, sir. He told Mr. Dalton that cheaters and fools didn't walk out of his saloon on their own feet. Those were his exact words. A lie." Cole had said nothing of the sort. But looking at the jury, 12 men pulled from the farms and mines surrounding the town, he could see the words landing like gospel. They wanted to believe. They needed to believe. Cole Mercer had been a shadow over this town for 8 years, winning too much, surviving too long, reminding them all that the frontier rewarded the ruthless and the sharp, while decent men broke their backs for nothing. "What happened next?" Kinsey pressed. Mr. Dalton left the saloon. He was upset, naturally, but not violent, not threatening. He simply walked outside. Talbot paused for effect. Mr. Mercer followed him. "Did you see what happened outside?" "I went to the door. I saw Mr. Dalton standing in the street trying to calm himself. And I saw Mr. Mercer approach him with his hand on his pistol. Cole's attorney, a young, nervous Helena lawyer named Peter Garfield, who'd been assigned to the case because no one else would take it, finally stood. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating about my client's intentions." "Overruled," Judge Thorne said without looking at Garfield. "Continue, Mr. Talbot." Talbot leaned forward, his voice dropping to the register of a man delivering terrible news. "They exchanged words. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard Mr. Dalton say he wanted no trouble, and I heard Mr. Mercer tell him it was too late for that." The courtroom held its breath. "And then?" Kinsey asked quietly. "Then Mr. Mercer drew his pistol and shot James Dalton in the chest. The boy, and he was just a boy really, 23 years old, fell in the dirt. Mr. Mercer stood over him for a moment, then holstered his weapon and walked back inside as if he'd done nothing more than swat a fly. The gallery exploded. Men shouted for justice. Women wept. Judge Thorne pounded his gavel until the handle cracked. Cole sat perfectly still, his fever-bright eyes fixed on Talbot's face. The man wouldn't meet his gaze. Kinsey let the chaos build for a moment before raising his hand. "No further questions, Your Honor." Peter Garfield stood, papers trembling in his hands. "Mr. Talbot, you say you saw the shooting clearly? Clear as I'm seeing you now, son. From inside the saloon doorway, in the dark, with lantern light behind you?" Garfield's voice cracked slightly, but he pressed forward. "How far is it from the saloon door to where Mr. Dalton fell?" 20 feet, perhaps, maybe 25. "And you're certain you heard Mr. Mercer threaten him?" "Certain as the grave." Garfield shuffled his papers. "Mr. Talbot, isn't it true that you've made 3 separate offers to purchase the Silver Dollar Saloon from Mr. Mercer over the past 2 years? Talbot's face tightened. "I'm a businessman, Mr. Garfield. I make many offers on many properties. And isn't it also true that after your most recent offer was refused, you told several men at the Prospectors Club that you would see Cole Mercer buried or broken before the year was out?" "Objection!" Kinsey shot to his feet. Hearsay and irrelevant. Sustained, Judge Thorne said. Move on, Mr. Garfield. But the seed was planted. Two of the jurors exchanged glances. It wasn't much, but it was something. Garfield tried a few more questions, but Talbot had been well coached. He deflected, insisted, maintained his story with the stubborn consistency of a man who'd been paid well to remember things a certain way. When Talbot finally stepped down, Cole leaned toward Garfield. He's lying about the distance. The body fell 40 feet from the door minimum, and I never drew on Jimmy Dalton. Then who shot him? Garfield whispered back. Cole said nothing, because the truth was worse than the lie, and the truth would destroy the only person in this town who'd ever given a damn whether he lived or died. Kinsey called his second witness, Deputy Marshal Frank Grafton. Grafton took the stand with the self-important bearing of a man who'd finally found himself on the right side of a lynching. He'd been one of Cole's regular poker opponents until Cole had caught him dealing seconds from a marked deck. After that, Grafton had worn his badge like a shield and his grudge like a knife. Deputy Grafton, Kinsey began, you were the first lawman on the scene after the shooting? I was, sir. Heard the shot from my boarding house 3 blocks away. Ran straight to the Silver Dollar. What did you find? Found James Dalton lying in the street, bleeding from a chest wound. Found Cole Mercer standing in the saloon doorway with a smoking pistol in his hand. Another ripple through the gallery. Cole closed his eyes briefly. The fever was getting worse. He could feel it climbing his spine like poison ivy. Did Mr. Mercer say anything to you? He said, boy had it coming. That one hit like a fist, because Cole had said exactly that, but not about the shooting. He'd been talking about the faro game, about Jimmy's reckless betting, but Grafton knew exactly how to twist it. Did you examine Mr. Dalton? I did. He was dead within minutes. Bullet had gone clean through his heart. And did you examine Mr. Mercer's weapon? 1 round fired, still warm. Kinsey let that sit for a moment. Deputy, in your professional opinion as a lawman with 8 years' experience, was this a case of self-defense? Grafton shook his head slowly. No, sir. Mr. Dalton was unarmed, didn't even have a knife on him. This was murder, plain and simple. No further questions. Peter Garfield stood, and this time there was a little more steel in his voice. Deputy Grafton, you say you found Found Mercer standing in the doorway with his weapon drawn? That's right. Was anyone else present? Miss Quinn was there. Mara Quinn, the woman who runs the gaming tables for Mercer. And where was she standing? Grafton hesitated. Near the door. How near? I don't recall exactly. Was she between Mr. Mercer and the street? Possibly. Did you examine Miss Quinn's hands for gunpowder residue? Grafton's face darkened. Mr. Mercer had the smoking gun, counselor. Didn't seem necessary to check the lady. Garfield pressed. But you didn't check, did you? You assumed. I followed the evidence. Did you follow it when you arrested Mr. Mercer for cheating at cards 2 years ago, only to have the charges dismissed when it turned out you were the one running a marked deck? The courtroom erupted again. Grafton's face went crimson. That's a damn lie. It's a matter of public record, Garfield shot back. Judge Thorne's gavel came down like thunder. Enough, mister! Garfield, one more outburst like that and you'll be held in contempt. Mr. Grafton, step down. But the damage was done. The jury was looking at Grafton differently now, not as an impartial lawman, but as a man with his own scores to settle. As the afternoon wore on, Kinsey called 3 more witnesses. A bartender who swore he'd heard Cole threaten violence. A prostitute from the cribs behind the saloon who claimed she'd seen Cole stalking Jimmy Dalton earlier that evening. A shopkeeper who testified that Cole had a reputation for settling disputes with bullets rather than words. Each testimony was a nail. Each one carefully crafted. Each one designed to paint the picture of a man who'd finally gone too far. And through it all, Cole sat silent, his fever climbing, his mind working through the angles like a chess player 3 moves from checkmate. Because he knew what was coming next. Kinsey had saved his best weapon for last. As the sun began to angle through the courthouse windows, painting the gallery in shades of amber and rust, the prosecutor stood and adjusted his coat. Your Honor, he said, his voice carrying the weight of a man about to deliver a killing blow. "The prosecution calls Miss Mara Quinn." The courtroom doors opened, and Mara walked in like a woman heading to her own execution. She was 32 years old, though the frontier had aged her in ways that numbers couldn't measure. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, a simple gray dress that had been mended more times than Cole could count, and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight, sharp and golden, and fierce enough to cut glass. She'd been dealing faro at the Silver Dollar for 6 years. Before that, she'd run a boarding house in Virginia City until a mining company lawyer had found a technicality in her deed and stolen the property out from under her. She'd arrived in Cole's town with nothing but a carpet bag, a derringer, and a way with cards that had earned her a place at his best table within a week. They'd never been lovers, the frontier was too raw for the kind of softness that required, but they'd been something stranger and more essential. Partners in survival. Two sharp people in a dull world, recognizing each other across a crowded room and deciding that was enough. Now she walked to the witness stand with her spine straight and her face blank, and Cole knew with absolute certainty that Kinsey was about to gut her in front of this entire town. The bailiff swore her in. She placed her hand on the Bible without trembling. Kinsey approached slowly, like a man gentling a wild horse before breaking it. "Miss Quinn, you work for the defendant, is that correct?" "I deal cards at the Silver Dollar. Cole owns the saloon, so yes, I work for him." "How long have you known Mr. Mercer?" 6 years, give or take." "Would you say you know him well?" Mara's eyes flicked to Cole for just an instant. "Well enough." "Then perhaps you can help us understand what happened on the night of October 14th. You were present during the confrontation between Mr. Mercer and Mr. Dalton?" "I was." "Tell us what you saw." Mara took a breath. When she spoke, her voice was steady but hollow, like a bell with a crack in it. "Jimmy Dalton was at my table that night. He'd been drinking, but not falling down drunk, just loose enough to be betting stupid." "And what happened?" "He placed a dead bet, tried to wager on the Queen of Hearts after it had already been played and burned. I called it invalid. He got angry." "Did Mr. Mercer intervene?" "Cole came to the table when Jimmy started raising his voice. He told Jimmy the bet didn't stand and offered to comp his drinks for the rest of the night. Jimmy told him to go to hell." Kinsey raised an eyebrow. "So Mr. Dalton was the aggressor?" "Jimmy was frustrated and drunk and looking to blame someone. Same as half the men who come through that saloon. Usually they sleep it off and come back the next week. But not this time. No, not this time." "What happened next, Miss Quinn?" Mara's hands tightened on the chair arms. "Jimmy stormed out, said he'd settle it in the street like a man. Cole followed him." "Why did Mr. Mercer follow him?" "To talk him down, to keep him from doing something stupid." Kinsey smiled. It was the kind of smile a cat gives a mouse. "But things escalated, didn't they?" "Yes." "How?" Mara closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, Cole could see the resignation there. She was about to walk into the trap, and they both knew it. Jimmy called Cole out, said if Cole was going to call him a cheat and a fool, he'd better be ready to back it up with iron. Mr. Dalton challenged Mr. Mercer to a gunfight. He was drunk and stupid and 23 years old. He didn't know what he was doing. But he issued the challenge. Yes. And what did Mr. Mercer do? This was it, the moment where everything turned. Cole tried to walk away, Mara said quietly. He told Jimmy to sleep it off and come back tomorrow, but Jimmy drew on him. The courtroom went silent. Mr. Dalton drew first? Kinsey asked, his voice dripping with false surprise. He was slow, drunk. His hand barely cleared leather before what, Miss Quinn? Mara's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Before I shot him. The gallery exploded. Men shouted. Women gasped. Judge Thorne's gavel cracked like rifle fire. And Cole Mercer, fever-bright and chain-bound and watching his last chance at survival disintegrate in front of him, finally understood the full weight of what Mara was doing. She was trying to save him by destroying herself. Kinsey let the chaos build before raising his hand for silence. You're saying you shot James Dalton? I stepped out of the saloon with Cole's spare pistol. When I saw Jimmy draw, I fired first. I didn't mean to kill him. I was trying to stop the fight before it started. And where did you aim? His chest. I'm not a good shot. I was trying for his shoulder, but you killed him instead. Yes. Kinsey turned to the jury, letting them see his skepticism. Miss Quinn, this is a remarkable confession. Why didn't you come forward before now? Because Cole told me not to. He said they'd hang a woman for this just as sure as they'd hang him, and at least he had a chance in court. How noble. Kinsey's voice turned sharp as broken glass. Tell me, Miss Quinn, how much is Mr. Mercer paying you to take the blame for his crime? Nothing. I'm telling the truth. Are you? Or are you a woman in love trying to save a man who doesn't deserve saving? Mara's face went very still. I'm not in love with Cole Mercer. No? Then perhaps you're simply a desperate woman trying to protect her livelihood. After all, if Mr. Mercer hangs, you lose your employment, don't you? You lose your home, your income, everything. That's not... Miss Quinn. Kinsey's voice dropped to something cold and surgical. Isn't it true that 6 years ago in Virginia City, you were arrested for prostitution? The courtroom went silent. Mara's face drained of color. Objection, Peter Garfield shouted. This is completely irrelevant. Your Honor, it goes directly to the witness's credibility, Kinsey said smoothly. Overruled. Answer the question, Miss Quinn. Mara's voice came out barely above a whisper. I was arrested. The charges were dropped. Because the sheriff felt sorry for you, or because you provided certain services in exchange for your freedom? That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Mara's hands were shaking now. I ran a boarding house. One of my tenants was a prostitute. When they raided her room, I was there collecting rent. They arrested us both. When they realized their mistake, they let me go. How convenient. And is that the story you told Mr. Mercer when you came looking for work at his saloon? Did you tell him you were an honest businesswoman fallen on hard times? Or did you tell him the truth, that you were a whore looking for a new protector? I never... Because that's what this is really about, isn't it, Miss Quinn? You're not confessing to save some noble ideal. You're confessing because you're Cole Mercer's whore, and without him, you're nothing but another broken woman in a hard territory with nowhere left to run. Mara stood up so fast the chair fell backward. You son of a bitch! The courtroom erupted into chaos. Judge Thorne pounded his gavel. Deputies moved toward the witness stand. And Cole Mercer, watching the woman who'd saved his life more times than he could count being torn apart in front of 50 strangers, did the only thing he could do. He laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. Wasn't theatrical. Just a low, dark sound that cut through the noise like a knife through silk. The courtroom went quiet. Everyone turned to look at him. Something amusing, Mr. Mercer? Judge Thorne asked coldly. Cole met the judge's eyes. Just appreciating the show, Your Honor. Mr. Kinsey's quite the performer. Must have practiced that speech all week. You'll keep silent or I'll have you gagged. Won't be necessary. Cole looked at Kinsey. But I'll tell you this for free, counselor. You want to know who shot Jimmy Dalton? It wasn't Mara Quinn. She's a better liar than that, but she's a terrible killer. Flinches every time she fires a gun. Mr. Mercer, Garfield started. I shot Jimmy Dalton, Cole said clearly. Not in murder. In a duel he called and I tried to walk away from. But I shot him. That's the truth. And all this theater about dead bets and smoking guns and Miss Quinn's past doesn't change it. Kinsey smiled. Finally, a confession. Not a confession. A correction. You want to hang me for putting down a drunk kid who drew on me first? Go ahead. But you leave Mara out of it. She dealt cards that night, same as always. Everything else is your invention. Judge Thorne leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, are you changing your plea? Cole felt the fever burning through him now, turning everything sharp and strange. I'm saying Jimmy Dalton called me out, drew his weapon, and I shot him before he could shoot me. That's not murder, Your Honor. That's survival. Do you have any proof of this alleged challenge? Mara was there. She heard it. And she just testified that she fired the shot. She lied to protect me, because that's what decent people do in this world. They try to protect the ones who matter, even when it costs them everything. The courtroom was silent now, everyone leaning forward, caught in the current of something that had stopped being a trial and started being something rawer. Kinsey recovered quickly. Your Honor, the defendant is clearly attempting to manipulate this court. His story has changed 3 times now. First he claimed innocence, then Miss Quinn confessed. Now he's claiming self-defense. I move that both testimonies be stricken and we proceed based on the physical evidence. Judge Thorne nodded slowly. Motion granted. Miss Quinn, you're dismissed. Mr. Mercer, you'll have your opportunity to testify in your own defense if your counsel chooses to call you. Mara stepped down from the witness stand, her face white, her hands still shaking. As she passed Cole's table, their eyes met for just an instant. He saw forgiveness there, and fury, and something that might have been goodbye. The trial continued through the afternoon, witness after witness, painting Cole Mercer as a violent man in a violent trade who'd finally crossed the line from dangerous to deadly. Kinsey wove it all together with the skill of a master storyteller, the dead bet, the confrontation, the shooting, the smoking gun. By the time the sun set and Judge Thorne called for closing arguments, Cole knew the verdict was already written. The jury had made up their minds. The town had made up its mind. The whole territory had made up its mind. Cole Mercer was going to hang. Not because he was guilty, but because he was convenient. And in the frontier territories of 1876, convenient guilt was the only kind that mattered. Peter Garfield stood to deliver his closing argument, young and earnest and hopelessly outmatched. Gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution has presented you with a story. A compelling story, I'll grant you. But a story is not the same as truth. The truth is that James Dalton challenged my client to a duel. The truth is that he drew first. The truth is that Cole Mercer did what any man in this territory would do when faced with a drawn weapon. He defended himself. Kinsey stood for his closing with the confidence of a man who'd already won. Gentlemen, the defense would have you believe that James Dalton, a young man barely old enough to vote, challenged one of the most feared gunmen in the Montana Territory to a duel. Does that sound reasonable to you? Or does it sound like the desperate invention of a man who knows the noose is waiting? He paused, letting it land. Cole Mercer has built his empire on fear and violence. He has destroyed anyone who challenged him, ruined anyone who opposed him. And when James Dalton dared to question his authority, he murdered him. Not in self-defense, not in a fair fight. In cold blood, in the street, like an execution. Kinsey's voice rose. This is your chance, gentlemen. Your chance to say that the law still means something in this territory. That murder will not be tolerated, no matter how feared the murderer. That justice, real justice, still exists west of the Mississippi. The jury deliberated for 20 minutes. When they returned, the foreman, a cattle rancher named Hutchins, who'd lost $200 at Cole's tables the previous spring, stood and delivered the verdict without meeting Cole's eyes. We find the defendant Cole Mercer guilty of murder in the first degree. Judge Thorne's gavel came down one final time. Cole Mercer, you are hereby sentenced to hang by the neck until dead, sentenced to be carried out at sunrise on October 21st, 1876. May heaven have mercy on your soul, sir, because this court has none. The gallery erupted in celebration. And Cole Mercer, fever-racked and chain-bound and condemned to die in 3 days, closed his eyes and wondered if Mara had made it out of town yet. He hoped so, because the storm was just beginning. They dragged Cole back to his cell in the failing light, his chains scraping against the wooden floor of the jailhouse like a death rattle. Deputy Grafton shoved him through the door hard enough that Cole stumbled, catching himself against the iron bars before the fever could pull him all the way down. 3 days, Mercer, Grafton said, his voice thick with satisfaction. 3 days and you'll be dancing on air. Hope it was worth it. Cole didn't answer. He lowered himself onto the narrow cot, feeling the fever climb another degree, and listened to Grafton's boots fade down the corridor. When the outer door slammed shut, the silence that followed was so complete it felt like being buried alive. He closed his eyes and tried to think, but his mind kept circling back to the same image. Mara standing in that witness box, her face white as cemetery marble, taking the blame for a killing she hadn't committed while a prosecutor tore her past open like a grave. The frontier had a way of marking women, not with the same scars it carved into men. No bullet wounds or knife fights or broken bones from brawls, but with something harder to heal. A ruined reputation. A whispered history. The kind of damage that followed a woman from town to town until there was nowhere left to run and no one left to believe her when she swore she was something more than what they'd decided she had to be. Cole had known Mara's story within a week of her arriving at the Silver Dollar. Not because she'd told him, she was too proud for that, but because he recognized the look in her eyes. That careful distance. That way of holding herself like someone who'd learned the hard way that the world took more than it gave, and the only way to survive was to keep the walls high and the doors locked. She dealt cards with a precision that bordered on artistry, read players like they were open books, and never once asked him for anything she hadn't earned. In 6 years, she'd become the best thing about that crooked little saloon. Maybe the best thing about the whole damn town. And now Kinsey had destroyed her in front of 50 witnesses because Cole had been stupid enough to let things escalate with a drunk kid who didn't know when to fold a losing hand. The outer door opened again. Cole sat up slowly, expecting Grafton coming back to gloat, or maybe one of the townspeople looking to spit through the bars. But the footsteps were lighter, quicker. Mara appeared in the corridor, carrying a covered basket and wearing the same gray dress she'd worn to court. Her face was composed now, the trembling gone, replaced by something harder and colder. "Deputy's drunk already," she said quietly, celebrating justice. Left the door unlocked. Cole stood, gripping the bars. "You shouldn't be here." "Probably not, but I brought you dinner. Figured they're not feeding you much and you look like hell." "I feel like hell." She set the basket down and pulled back the cloth, revealing bread, cheese, and a small tin cup of broth. "Eat. You need your strength." Cole didn't move. "What you did today saved your life, you ungrateful bastard. Ruined yours." Mara's jaw tightened. "My reputation was ruined 6 years ago when I couldn't produce a deed I'd paid for fair and square. Today just made it official in a different town." Don't." Her voice was sharp as a slap. "Don't you dare apologize or try to take the blame or do whatever noble idiot thing you're planning. I made my choice. I knew what it would cost." Cole gripped the bars harder, feeling the cold iron bite into his palms. "They're going to hang me anyway. Your testimony didn't change anything except making you a target." "Maybe, but at least I tried." "You shouldn't have." Mara's eyes flashed. "Why? Because I'm just some broken woman who deals cards in your saloon? Because I'm not worth the risk? Because you're the only decent thing left in this whole damn territory, and I won't watch you burn for my mistakes." The words landed between them like stones in still water. Mara stared at him for a long moment, her face unreadable in the dim lamplight. "Eat your dinner, Cole," she said finally, her voice softening just a fraction. "And stop trying to be a martyr. It doesn't suit you." She turned to leave. "Mara." She paused, her back to him. "Thank you." She didn't turn around. "Don't thank me yet. This isn't over." Her footsteps faded down the corridor, and Cole was alone again with the bread, the fever, and the certain knowledge that in 72 hours he'd be standing on a scaffold with a rope around his neck. He ate the food mechanically, tasting nothing, his mind working through possibilities the way it had worked through poker hands for 20 years. There were no good options, no hidden cards to play, no last-minute bluff that would turn this game around. He'd lost. The frontier had finally caught up with him, and all the sharp instincts and quick hands that had kept him alive this long didn't mean a damn thing when the whole town wanted him dead, and the law was a tool in the hands of men who'd been waiting years for this chance. The night dragged on. Cole dozed fitfully, the fever painting strange dreams across the inside of his skull. Card games where the faces melted, gunfights where the bullets moved like honey, Mara standing on a gallows that turned into the witness stand and back again. He woke to voices in the outer office, low and urgent. One of them was Grafton, slurred with whiskey. The other took him a moment to place, and when he did, ice ran down his spine despite the fever. Edwin Talbot. Cole moved to the bars silently, pressing close enough to catch fragments through the thick door. "Told you the verdict was guaranteed," Talbot was saying. "Kinsey did his job. Now you do yours." "I don't like it," Grafton muttered. "Hanging's one thing. This is different. This is insurance. Mercer's survived worse than a rope. We need to make sure he doesn't walk out of here breathing, trial or no trial. Cole's hands tightened on the bars. What about the woman? Grafton asked. Quinn? She's finished. Town won't do business with a whore, and she can't run cards anywhere else in the territory after today. She'll be gone by week's end. And if she talks? Who's going to listen? She confessed to murder on the stand and no one believed her. Anything she says now is just desperation. The voices dropped lower. Cole strained to hear but caught only fragments. Something about the hanging, about making sure it went off without interruption, about money changing hands. Then boots scraped and the outer door opened and closed, and Grafton's heavy footsteps stumbled toward the cells. Cole was back on his cot, eyes closed, breathing steady, when Grafton's face appeared at the bars. You awake, Mercer? Cole didn't move. Grafton grunted. Good. Sleep while you can. 3 more nights, and then it's judgment time. The deputy moved away. A door slammed. Silence settled again. Cole opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling, his mind racing despite the fever. Talbot wasn't just here to gloat. He was here to make sure Cole didn't survive long enough to cause problems, which meant the hanging might be the least of his worries. He needed to get word to someone. Anyone. But who? Peter Garfield was a decent enough lawyer, but he was young and outmatched and probably already packing to leave town before the stink of this trial stuck to him. The judge was bought, or bullied, or simply indifferent. The jury had delivered their verdict with the speed of men who'd made up their minds before walking into that courtroom. That left Mara, and Mara had already sacrificed too much. The next morning came cold and gray. Grafton brought watery coffee and hardtack that tasted like sawdust. Cole ate because his body needed fuel, not because he had any appetite. His fever had broken sometime in the night, leaving him weak but clear-headed. Around noon, Peter Garfield appeared, looking like a man who'd slept poorly and thought worse. Mr. Mercer, he said, settling onto the stool outside the cell. I filed an appeal with the territorial governor's office. It's a long shot, but don't waste your time, Cole said. The governor wants me dead same as everyone else. I've won too much money from too many connected men. Garfield's shoulders sagged. Then I don't know what else to do. The trial was a farce. The verdict was predetermined. You should have had weeks to prepare a defense, and instead we had 3 days and a prosecutor who came armed with enough dirt to bury half the territory. Talbot paid for that prosecutor. Probably paid for half the witnesses, too. Can you prove it? Cole laughed bitterly. With what? I'm locked in a cell waiting to hang. My word means nothing, and anyone who might speak for me has either been bought off or scared silent. Garfield ran a hand through his hair. Miss Quinn came to see me this morning. She wants to recant her testimony. Says she'll swear she lied to protect you. Tell her no. Mr. Mercer, tell her no. She's already been through enough. I won't have her stand up in front of that court again and give Kinsey another chance to gut her. Then what do you want me to do? Cole met the young lawyer's eyes. Nothing. Go home. Send your bill to Mara at the Silver Dollar. She'll handle the estate once this is done. Garfield stared at him for a long moment, then stood slowly. I'm sorry, Mr. Mercer. I wish I could have done more. You did what you could. It wasn't your fault the deck was stacked before you sat down. The lawyer left, and Cole was alone again with the afternoon sun slanting through the barred window and the taste of failure sharp in his mouth. But Garfield's visit had planted a seed. Mara had gone to see the lawyer, which meant she was still fighting, still looking for angles, still refusing to accept that sometimes the game was rigged too well to beat. That night, she came again. This time she brought stew and cornbread, and her face had the set determination of someone who'd made a decision and wasn't about to be talked out of it. I'm leaving town tomorrow, she said without preamble. Taking the stage to Helena. From there, I'll catch the train east. Cole felt something cold settle in his chest. Running? Surviving. Same thing you taught me. Don't try to stop me, Cole. There's nothing left for me here. Talbot's already been around to the saloon, making offers on the property. Says he'll buy it from your estate after the hanging. I told him to go to hell, but we both know he'll get it eventually. The Silver Dollar is yours if you want it. I'll sign it over before they hang you. Her voice was hard. No, thank you. I don't want to run a saloon in a town that just watched its owner swing from a rope. I'd be out of business in a month. She had a point. The frontier had a long memory and a short supply of forgiveness. "Where will you go?" Cole asked. "I don't know yet. Somewhere, the telegraph lines haven't carried the story. Somewhere I can deal cards without someone throwing Virginia City in my face every time I sit down at a table." Cole gripped the bars. "You could go to San Francisco. I've got money in a bank there. Accounts in both our names. You take it. Start fresh." Mara's eyes widened. "How much money?" "Enough to buy a decent place. Maybe a small gaming house if you're careful." "You never told me." "Didn't seem necessary. I figured I'd get shot or stabbed eventually, and at least this way you'd have something to show for putting up with my bullshit for 6 years. For the first time since the trial, Mara's composure cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. "You're an idiot, Cole Mercer. Been called worse." She reached through the bars and he took her hand. Her fingers were cold, but they gripped his with surprising strength. "I wish things had been different," she said quietly. "Me too. I wish I could have saved you." "You did save me. More times than you know." She pulled her hand back, wiping her eyes quickly. "The bank details?" Cole told her everything. Account numbers, passwords, the name of the banker who'd helped him set it up 5 years ago when a particularly good run at the tables had left him with more cash than he could safely keep in a frontier town. She listened carefully, committing it all to memory. "Thank you," she said when he finished. "Thank you for 6 good years in a world that doesn't give many." Mara stood, smoothing her dress. "I'll be gone before sunrise. I don't want to be here when they—" "I know." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Cole, I think you're a better man than this town deserves. And I think you're going to do just fine in San Francisco. Better than fine. You're going to thrive." She smiled then, small and sad. "Goodbye, Cole." "Goodbye, Mara." This time, when her footsteps faded, Cole knew he wouldn't see her again. The thought should have hurt more than it did, but mostly he just felt relief. She'd survive. She'd build something new. And in a few years, maybe she'd deal cards in some elegant California gaming house and tell stories about the wild Montana territory without mentioning his name. That would be enough. The second night passed slower than the first. Cole's fever stayed down, but the weakness remained, a bone-deep exhaustion that came from more than just illness. He'd been running on sharp instincts and sharper luck for 2 decades, and now both had finally run out. Morning brought Grafton with more watery coffee and the news that the gallows were nearly finished. The deputy seemed almost cheerful about it. "Carpenter says it'll hold your weight easy. Built it strong, just in case." Cole said nothing. "You got any last requests, preacher? Last meal?" "Just get it over with." Grafton grinned. 2 more days, Mercer. Try not to die before we can hang you proper." After the deputy left, Cole lay on the cot and stared at the ceiling. He'd played a lot of bad hands in his life, but this was the worst. No cards left to play, no bluffs left to run. Just the slow countdown to a rope and a drop and the end of everything. Around midday, the outer door opened again, and Cole tensed, expecting Grafton, or maybe Talbot, coming to gloat. But the footsteps were different, heavier, more measured, boots with authority. A man appeared at the cell bars, and Cole sat up slowly, studying him. Tall, late 40s, hard-faced and weather-worn, with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen their share of frontier justice. He wore a marshal's badge pinned to his vest, but it wasn't local. The territorial seal gleamed on the star. "Cole Mercer?" the man said, his voice carrying the flat neutrality of someone who'd delivered bad news to too many people to waste emotion on it. "Depends on who's asking." "Marshal Wade Barrett, Territorial Office sent me to review your case." Cole's pulse quickened despite himself. "Little late for a review, Marshal. Verdict's already in." "Verdict can be appealed if there's grounds." "And are there grounds?" Barrett pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Received this telegram yesterday from a banker in Helena. Man named Charles Whitmore. Says you've got an account in San Francisco with his correspondent bank and that a woman named Mara Quinn came asking about it. He got curious, started asking questions, found out about your trial." Cole's throat tightened. "Mara went to a banker?" "She went to 3, trying to move your money before the territory could seize it. Smart woman. Careful, too. But Whitmore knows me, and he knows a rigged trial when he hears about one. So he sent word. and I came to take a look. What's there to look at? I was tried and convicted. Hanging set for day after tomorrow. Barrett's eyes narrowed. I've been a marshal for 23 years, Mercer. I know what a fair trial looks like. And I know what it looks like when someone with money decides a man needs to die legal and clean, so there's no messy questions afterward. He unfolded the paper, scanning it. Prosecution came from Helena, paid by Edwin Talbot. Half the witnesses have financial ties to Talbot's mining operations. The jury foreman lost money at your tables. The presiding judge owes Talbot's bank $3,000 on a land loan that's about to come due. Cole felt something stir in his chest that might have been hope if he hadn't learned better. Sounds like corruption, Marshal, but proving it's a different game. Usually, but here's the interesting part. Barrett leaned against the bars. I pulled the death report on James Dalton. Bullet wound to the chest, like they said, but the entry angle's all wrong. Wrong how? Shot came from above. Steep angle, traveling downward through the heart. Now, you're what, 6 feet tall? Dalton was 5'9", according to his records. If you'd shot him in a street duel, the bullet would have traveled level, or maybe slightly upward if he was stumbling back. It wouldn't have gone down. Cole's mind raced. Mara was on the saloon steps, about 4 feet up. If she'd fired from there, the angle would match exactly. Barrett folded the paper. Which means either your lady friend was telling the truth when she confessed, or there's a third possibility nobody's considered yet. What's that? That someone else shot Dalton from an elevated position, and everyone's been so busy painting you as a killer they didn't bother to look at the actual evidence. The cell felt suddenly smaller. You're saying someone set me up? I'm saying the facts don't match the story, and that makes me curious. Curious enough to postpone your hanging until I can dig deeper. Cole gripped the bars. Can you do that? I can request a stay of execution while I investigate. Judge won't like it, but territorial authority trumps local jurisdiction. You'll stay in this cell, but at least you'll stay breathing while I sort out what really happened that night. Why are you doing this, Marshal? You don't know me. For all you know, I did kill that kid. Barrett's face hardened. Maybe you did, but I've seen too many hangings that turned out to be murders dressed up in legal clothes. If you're guilty, you'll swing. But if you're innocent, or if this whole thing is a setup, I'm not letting Talbot and his pet prosecutor get away with it. The law means something, Mercer, even out here, especially out here. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Where's Mara Quinn now? Gone. Stage to Helena, then east. She tell you where? San Francisco eventually, but she's probably halfway to the territorial line by now. Barrett nodded. Probably safer that way. Talbot's got a long reach, and if he thinks she's a problem, he'll solve her permanent. If you find proof Talbot's behind this, then he'll stand trial same as anyone. That's how the law works when it's not being bought and sold like cattle. The marshal left, and Cole sank back onto the cot, his mind spinning. A stay of execution. A territorial marshal asking hard questions. The possibility, slim, fragile, but real, that he might not die in 2 days. It wasn't much, but it was more than he'd had an hour ago. The afternoon dragged on. Cole dozed fitfully, waking every time he heard footsteps, expecting Grafton to come deliver bad news. But the deputy didn't appear, and the silence stretched long enough that Cole started to believe Barrett had actually done it, actually used his authority to stop the execution. As evening fell, the outer door banged open, and Judge Thorne's voice filled the corridor, sharp with fury. "Where is he?" Grafton stammered something inaudible. "I don't care about territorial jurisdiction. This is my courtroom, my town, and that man was tried and convicted fair and legal." Another voice cut in, Barrett, calm and implacable. "Judge Thorne, the stay is signed and filed. If you have objections, you can submit them to the territorial governor's office. Until then, Cole Mercer remains in custody, pending further investigation." Investigation into what? The man confessed. He claimed self-defense. That's not the same as a confession, and there are irregularities in the evidence that warrant review. Irregularities? Thorne's voice dripped scorn. You mean the desperate lies of a dying gambler trying to talk his way out of a noose? I mean inconsistencies between the witness testimony and the physical evidence. which is exactly the sort of thing that should trouble a judge interested in actual justice rather than convenient verdicts. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. "You're making a mistake, Marshal," Thorne said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "This town won't forget interference from territorial busybodies who don't understand local matters. This town doesn't have a choice. The stay stands. If you don't like it, take it up with the governor." More footsteps, a door slamming. Then Barrett appeared at the cell bars, his face unreadable. "You just made yourself a powerful enemy," Cole said. "Won't be the first. Probably won't be the last." Barrett studied him. "Judge is right about one thing, though. This town's not going to like me poking around, which means I need to work fast before someone decides to solve the problem with a bullet instead of a gavel." "What do you need from me?" "The truth. All of it. Starting with what really happened outside that saloon." Cole took a breath and told him everything. The faro game, Jimmy Dalton's dead bet, the confrontation, the drunken challenge. The moment when Jimmy's hand dropped toward his gun, and Cole knew with the cold certainty of 20 years surviving in places where hesitation meant death, that he had maybe 2 seconds to decide whether to draw or die. And how Mara had appeared on the saloon steps with his spare pistol, shouting for both of them to stop, her face white with fear and fury. "I drew," Cole said quietly. "But I didn't fire. Mara did. I saw the muzzle flash from the corner of my eye. Heard the shot. Jimmy went down, and I just stood there like an idiot, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. And then? Then Grafton showed up. Saw me standing there with my gun drawn, saw Jimmy bleeding in the dirt. Put 2 and 2 together and came up with 5. But it didn't matter because the math worked well enough to hang me." Barrett nodded slowly. "Why did Miss Quinn shoot him?" "To stop the fight. She knew if Jimmy drew, I'd kill him. And she knew that even in self-defense, the town would use it as an excuse to come after me. So she tried to save us both." "By killing Dalton herself?" "She's not a good shot. She was aiming to wound, to scare him into backing down. But the bullet hit center mass and he bled out before anyone could do anything. So she saved your life and destroyed her own reputation doing it. That's about the size of it." Barrett was quiet for a long moment. "You love her?" The question caught Cole off guard. "She's the best friend I've ever had in a world that doesn't hand out friends for free." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I've got." The marshal pulled out a notebook, scribbling notes. "I need to find the bullet. If it's still in Dalton's body, or if it was recovered during the burial, I can match it to the weapon. Your gun versus Miss Quinn's." "Good luck." They buried Jimmy 2 days after the shooting. Boot Hill, probably. No headstone. "Then I'll dig him up if I have to." Barrett pocketed the notebook. "One more question. If Talbot's behind this setup, why? What's he really after?" "The silver dollar. He's been trying to buy it for 2 years. It sits on a piece of land that borders his biggest mining claim. If he owns the saloon, he controls the water rights to Willow Creek, which feeds his operation. Without those water rights, his mine's worthless." Barrett's eyes sharpened. "So killing you gives him the property. And ruining Mara makes sure she can't fight the sale. She'd never be able to hold the place after what Kinsey did to her in that courtroom. Convenient. Frontier justice usually is. For the people with money." Barrett straightened. "All right. I've got enough to start pulling threads. You sit tight. Don't talk to anyone except your lawyer. And if Grafton or anyone else tries anything, you yell loud enough for me to hear." "Where will you be?" "Boot Hill, talking to a dead man." The marshal left, and Cole was alone again with the darkness and the faint sound of the wind rattling the jailhouse shutters. But for the first time since the trial had started, he felt something other than resignation. He felt the sharp, dangerous edge of possibility. Barrett didn't return that night, and Cole spent the hours between dusk and dawn listening to the sounds of the town settling into uneasy sleep. Somewhere out past the jailhouse walls, men were drinking in the saloons, women were closing up shop windows, and the gallows that had been built for him stood empty in the town square, waiting like a patient executioner. Morning came cold and sharp. Grafton brought coffee that tasted like boiled dirt and didn't meet Cole's eyes when he shoved the tin cup through the bars. Something had shifted in the deputy's manner, less swagger, more wariness. Word had gotten around that a territorial marshal was asking uncomfortable questions, and even men who thought they were untouchable started looking over their shoulders when federal authority came sniffing around their business. "Marshal Barrett came back yet?" Cole asked. Grafton grunted. "Ain't seen him since yesterday. Probably gave up and headed back to Helena. Territorial office don't care about local matters once they realize how much trouble it is." He didn't strike me as the type to give up easy. "Yeah, well, a lot of men strike you one way and turn out another." Grafton's voice carried an edge of something that might have been nervousness. "You best not get your hopes up, Mercer. Stay of execution or not, this town wants you dead. Marshall can only hold that back so long before something gives." The deputy left before Cole could answer, and the morning dragged on with excruciating slowness. No visitors, no news. Just the bare cell and the weak October sunlight creeping across the floor like it was in no particular hurry to reach anywhere. Around noon, the outer door banged open hard enough to rattle the hinges. Multiple sets of boots on the wooden floor, voices raised in argument. Then Edwin Talbot appeared at the cell bars, flanked by two men Cole didn't recognize. Hired muscle, by the look of them, with the dead eyes and easy violence of men who'd learned their trade in mining camps and cattle wars. "Mr. Mercer," Talbot said, his voice carrying that particular smoothness of a snake oil salesman who'd found a captive audience. "I thought it was time we had a conversation." Cole stayed on the cot, keeping his movements lazy and unconcerned despite the fact that every instinct was screaming danger. "We've got nothing to talk about, Talbot. You already got your verdict. What more do you want?" "I want to make you an offer." "Not interested." Talbot smiled. "You haven't heard it yet, and don't need to. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. Not even your life?" That got Cole's attention. He sat up slowly, meeting Talbot's eyes. "I'm listening?" Talbot gestured to one of the hired men, who produced a folded document from inside his coat. "This is a deed transfer for the Silver Dollar Saloon. Sign it over to me and I'll make sure the territorial marshal receives evidence that James Dalton is alive and well, living under an assumed name in Oregon. The murder charge disappears. You walk free." Cole stared at him. "You're admitting you fabricated evidence?" "I'm admitting nothing. I'm offering you a business proposition, your property in exchange for your freedom. Seems like a fair trade to me." "And if I refuse?" Talbot's smile widened. "Then Marshal Barrett will unfortunately discover that his investigation has hit a dead end. No new evidence, no irregularities, just a convicted murderer trying to delay the inevitable. The stay of execution gets lifted and you hang on schedule." Cole's mind raced through the angles. Talbot was desperate, had to be, to risk making this offer in person, which meant Barrett had found something, or was close to finding something, that scared the mining magnate enough to try bribery instead of waiting for the legal machinery to grind Cole into dust. "Where's Grafton?" Cole asked. "Deputy Grafton is running errands for me at the moment. We have perhaps 10 minutes before he returns, so I suggest you make your decision quickly." "What happened to Jimmy Dalton?" Talbot's smile never wavered. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Barrett said the bullet angle was wrong, said it came from above, not straight on. Which means either Mara shot him from the saloon steps or someone else shot him from somewhere high up, a window maybe, or a rooftop." "Fascinating speculation. Not relevant to my offer." Cole leaned forward. "You hired someone to kill that kid and frame me for it. Probably figured a drunk gambler picking a fight would make perfect cover. Nobody would question it. Nobody would look too close. Just another frontier shooting that got out of hand. You have quite an imagination, Mr. Mercer." "Do I? Then explain to me how you're so certain you can produce evidence that Dalton's alive when the entire town watched them bury him 3 weeks ago." Talbot's smile finally cracked, just a fraction. "The offer expires in 5 minutes. Sign the deed or don't. But understand that if you refuse, you'll be making a choice that can't be undone." One of the hired men moved closer to the bars, his hand resting on the pistol at his hip. A threat, clear and simple. Cole stood slowly, walking to the bars. "I've got a counteroffer for you, Talbot. Take your deed and get the hell out of my sight. And when Marshal Barrett comes back with whatever he's digging up out there, you best hope you've got a faster horse than he does." Talbot's face hardened. "You're making a mistake. Won't be my first, probably won't be my last. You could have walked away from this, could have taken your freedom and disappeared into the territories where no one would ever find you, but you're too proud. too stupid, and that pride is going to cost you everything. Maybe, but at least I won't be you, spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when someone figures out you murdered a 23-year-old kid to steal a piece of land. Talbot stepped back from the bars, his composure returning. Enjoy your last few days, Mr. Mercer. I assure you they will be your last. He turned and left, the hired men following like wolves trailing their pack leader. The outer door slammed, and silence rushed back in to fill the space their threats had occupied. Cole sat back down on the cot, his hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, he'd lived with fear so long it had become background noise, but from the adrenaline crash that came after staring down loaded guns and choosing defiance over survival. Talbot had just confirmed everything. The setup. The frame. The certainty that Jimmy Dalton's death had been manufactured specifically to destroy Cole and seize the silver dollar, which meant Barrett's investigation was hitting nerves and desperate men made mistakes. The question was whether the marshal would find proof before Talbot found a way to eliminate the problem permanently. The afternoon burned away slowly. Cole dozed, woke, paced the small cell, and fought the urge to rattle the bars like a caged animal. Time had always been his enemy in cards, the slow bleed of chips, the gradual erosion of luck. But this waiting was worse. This was playing a hand blind while other men held all the cards and decided whether he lived or died based on mathematics he couldn't see. As the sun angled toward evening, the outer door opened again, quieter this time. Barrett appeared, his coat dusty and his face grim. He was carrying something wrapped in oilcloth. "Find anything?" Cole asked. Barrett unlocked the cell door and stepped inside, closing it behind him. "Found plenty. Whether it's enough is another question." He unwrapped the oilcloth, revealing a misshapen lead bullet. "Dug up Dalton's grave this morning. Took me 3 hours and a very unhappy gravedigger, but I found this lodged in his spine. Bullet went through the heart, hit bone, and stopped." Cole studied the bullet. "That from my gun?" "That's what I need to determine. What caliber do you carry?" ".44. "And Miss Quinn's Derringer?" ".41. Barrett produced a small brass measuring tool and examined the bullet carefully. After a long moment, he looked up. "This is .41 caliber. Your gun didn't fire the shot that killed James Dalton." The words hung in the air like smoke. Cole felt something unclench in his chest that had been locked tight since the moment Grafton had slapped chains on his wrists. "So Mara was telling the truth," Cole said quietly. "About firing the shot, yes. About it being accidental, I'm less certain. The bullet placement is too clean. Center mass, straight through the heart. That's not a panicked shot from a woman trying to wound. That's a marksman's kill. Mara can barely hit a target at 10 feet, which means someone else fired the shot, or someone's been lying about Miss Quinn's abilities." Barrett rewrapped the bullet. "I also did some checking on the witnesses from your trial. The bartender who testified against you. He's Edwin Talbot's nephew. The prostitute who claimed she saw you stalking Dalton? She owes Talbot's bank $800 on a gambling debt. The shopkeeper? He sold his business to Talbot 2 weeks before the trial for 3 times what it was worth." Cole leaned against the cell wall. "They were all paid off. Or coerced. Talbot's got enough leverage in this town to make people say whatever he needs them to say. But here's what bothers me. If Talbot wanted you dead badly enough to manufacture a murder charge, why use Dalton? The kid had no connection to you or the saloon before that night. He was just a drifter passing through." Maybe that was the point. Someone nobody would miss. Someone whose death wouldn't raise questions. Except it did raise questions. You claimed self-defense from the start. Miss Quinn confessed to the shooting. The evidence doesn't match the official story. For a setup, it's remarkably sloppy. Cole thought back to that night, replaying every detail. The faro game, Jimmy's escalating bets, the dead card, the argument, and something that had bothered him at the time but that he'd been too sick and too desperate to examine closely. "Jimmy knew the rules," Cole said slowly. "He wasn't a greenhorn. When I came to the table, he looked relieved, not angry, like he'd been waiting for me to show up." Barrett's eyes sharpened. "Keep talking." "He asked if there was any way to reverse the call, said it was an honest mistake that he'd had too much to drink. But his eyes were clear. He wasn't that drunk. And when I told him the bet didn't stand, he got angry too fast, like he'd been rehearsing the reaction." "You think he was playing a part?" "I think someone paid him to start a fight. to create a situation that would escalate into violence, but I don't think he knew he was going to die for it. Barrett paced the small cell, his boots scraping against the floor. So Talbot hires Dalton to provoke you. Maybe promises him money to pick a fight and make you look bad in front of witnesses. But then something goes wrong. Dalton pushes too hard, or you don't react the way Talbot expected, and the whole thing spirals out of control. And then someone shoots Dalton to make sure the setup sticks, Cole finished. Someone with a .41 caliber weapon and a clean angle from above. Which brings us back to Miss Quinn. She had the right caliber. She was positioned on the saloon steps, and her testimony put her at the scene with your spare pistol. Cole shook his head. Mara didn't kill anyone. She's many things, but she's not a hired gun. Then who else had access to that weapon? The question hung between them like a noose. Cole's mind worked through the possibilities, sorting through faces and motives and opportunities the way he'd sort through cards looking for patterns. The spare pistol was kept behind the bar, Cole said. Anyone working that night could have taken it. Mara, the bartender, any of the dealers, the cleaning girls. Who was working the bar that night? Kid named Thomas Riley, Talbot's nephew. Barrett swore under his breath. The same nephew who testified he heard you threaten violence? Same one. Where is he now? Haven't seen him since the trial. Probably back working for Talbot's mining operation. Barrett moved to the cell door. I need to find Riley. If he had access to the weapon and he's connected to Talbot, he might be the shooter. Or he might be dead, Cole said flatly. Talbot doesn't leave loose ends. If Riley knows too much, he's a liability. Then I better find him fast. Barrett paused at the door. One more thing. Talbot came to see you today. How did you know? Deputy mentioned it, said Talbot wanted to discuss a business arrangement. Cole smiled without humor. He offered to make evidence appear that would clear me of murder, in exchange for the deed to the silver dollar. Did you take it? What do you think? I think you're either brave or stupid, and I haven't decided which yet. Barrett opened the cell door. Sit tight, don't talk to anyone, and if Talbot sends his men back, you start yelling and don't stop until I hear you. Where are you going? To have a conversation with a bartender, and maybe to dig up another grave if it comes to that. The marshal left, and Cole was alone again with the silence and the dying light. But something had shifted. The game was still rigged, the deck still stacked, but now there were cards in play that Talbot didn't know about. Evidence that contradicted the official story. Witnesses with conflicting testimonies. A bullet that didn't match the murder weapon. It wasn't much, but it was enough to create doubt, and doubt was the one thing that could unravel even the most carefully constructed lie. Night fell slowly, the last rays of sun painting the cell walls in shades of rust and shadow. Cole sat on the cot and waited, his mind turning over possibilities like a gambler calculating odds. Talbot would move soon, had to move now that Barrett was pulling threads. The question was whether the marshal would find proof before Talbot found a way to silence him permanently. Somewhere around midnight, the outer door opened. Footsteps in the corridor, too light to be Grafton. Cole tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward where his pistol would have been if he'd still had one. Peter Garfield appeared at the bars, his face pale in the lamplight. Mr. Mercer, I need to talk to you. Little late for a legal consultation, counselor? Garfield glanced over his shoulder nervously. I just came from Judge Thorne's chambers. He's drafting an order to lift the stay of execution. Says Marshal Barrett has exceeded his authority, and the territorial office has no grounds to interfere with local justice. Cole's jaw tightened. When does the order take effect? Tomorrow morning. They're scheduling your hanging for noon. That's fast. Too fast. Thorne's not even pretending this is legal anymore. He's just ramming it through before Barrett can gather enough evidence to stop it. Can you appeal? To who? The next highest authority is the territorial governor, and he's 3 days away by telegraph. Even if he responded immediately, the execution would be over before his response arrived. Cole leaned back against the wall. Sounds like Talbot's making his final move. Garfield stepped closer to the bars, his voice dropping. There's something else. I've been asking around about Thomas Riley. Nobody's seen him since the trial. His boarding house says he packed up and left town the day after you were convicted. Didn't even collect his last wages from the saloon. He run, or did someone run him? I don't know, but I found something at his room. Garfield pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and pushed it through the bars. It was hidden under a loose floorboard. Landlady let me search after I told her I was settling Riley's accounts. Cole unfolded the paper. It was a letter, written in a careless scrawl. Thomas. Second payment on delivery as promised. Make sure the shot is clean and the weapon is planted where Barrett's people will find it. Once Mercer hangs, the property transfers and you're free to leave town with your share. Don't get nervous. Everything's arranged. E.T. Cole read it twice, his blood running cold. This is Talbot's handwriting? I compared it to documents filed at the land office. It's a match. This is a confession, proof of conspiracy to commit murder. It's evidence, Garfield corrected, but it doesn't explicitly say Talbot ordered the killing. A good lawyer could argue it's about something else entirely. It mentions the shot, the weapon, the property transfer. What else could it be about? That's for a jury to decide. But it's enough to raise reasonable doubt about your conviction. Enough to force a new trial at minimum. Cole looked up. You need to get this to Barrett. I'm trying, but the marshal's out at Talbot's mining camp and I can't reach him before morning. By the time he gets back to town, you'll already be on the gallows. Then file an emergency appeal. Take this to Judge Thorne and demand a postponement. Garfield's face twisted with frustration. Thorne won't see me. Said he's done hearing arguments on this case. The only thing that'll stop this execution now is a direct order from the territorial governor or evidence so overwhelming that Thorne can't ignore it. This letter isn't enough. Not on its own. It's circumstantial, unsigned. Could have been planted. Thorne will tear it apart and you know it. Cole crumpled the letter in his fist. Then what the hell am I supposed to do? Garfield was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Run. What? The deputy's drunk in the back room, doors unlocked. I can keep him distracted for 10 minutes, maybe 15. That's enough time for you to get to the livery, steal a horse, and get out of town. Cole stared at him. You're offering to help me escape? I'm offering to look the other way while you save your own life. There's a difference. Not much of one. They'll disbar you, probably charge you as an accessory. Better than watching an innocent man hang because I wasn't brave enough to bend the rules. Garfield's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. I became a lawyer because I believed in justice, Mr. Mercer. Real justice. Not this mockery. If the system won't protect you, then maybe the system deserves to be broken. Cole felt something shift in his chest. Respect, gratitude, and the sharp awareness that accepting this offer would destroy a young man's career and possibly his life. I can't let you do this. It's not your choice. The door's unlocked. What you do with that information is up to you. Garfield, 10 minutes, Mr. Mercer. Then I'm waking the deputy and reporting an escape. What happens between now and then is none of my concern. The young lawyer turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. The outer door opened and closed, and then there was only silence. Cole sat very still, his mind racing. The cell door was unlocked. Grafton was drunk. He could walk out of here, steal a horse, and be halfway to the territorial border before anyone noticed he was gone. It was a straight shot north to Canada, maybe 2 days hard riding if he didn't stop. He'd done it before, years ago, when a claim dispute in Colorado had turned deadly and the law had come looking for someone to blame. He could survive, could disappear into the vast emptiness of the frontier and build a new life under a new name in a place where nobody knew Cole Mercer or cared about a rigged trial in a Montana mining town. But running meant abandoning everything. The silver dollar, his reputation, the fragile possibility that Barrett might actually find enough evidence to clear his name and hold Talbot accountable. And it meant letting Mara's sacrifice mean nothing. She'd stood in that courtroom and confessed to murder to save him. She'd endured Kinsey's character assassination, watched her past get torn open in front of 50 strangers, and walked away from the only home she'd had in 6 years, all because she believed Cole deserved better than a rigged trial and a short rope. If he ran now, he proved that her faith was misplaced, that he was exactly what Talbot and Kinsey and Judge Thorne had painted him as, a coward who'd do anything to save his own skin. Cole stood and walked to the cell door. It swung open on silent hinges. The corridor stretched ahead of him, empty and waiting. Freedom was 20 feet away. 20 feet and one choice that would define who he was and what his life had meant. He thought about Mara, somewhere on a train heading east, carrying the weight of her ruined reputation and the memory of a man who'd been too proud to save himself. He thought about Barrett, digging up graves and chasing witnesses because he still believed the law meant something. He thought about Peter Garfield, risking everything because he'd rather break the rules than watch injustice triumph. And he thought about Jimmy Dalton, a 23-year-old kid who'd taken Talbot's money and walked into a trap he didn't understand, dying in the dirt because greed and ambition needed a convenient corpse. Cole stepped back into the cell and pulled the door closed. It locked with a quiet click. He lay down on the cot and stared at the ceiling, listening to the night sounds of the town settling into sleep. Somewhere out there, Barrett was hunting for truth. Garfield was risking his career. And Mara was carrying the pieces of a broken life toward something that might be better. The least Cole could do was stand his ground and see this through to the end. Whatever that end might be. Morning would come soon enough, and with it, the gallows. But tonight, in this bare cell with the door unlocked and freedom within reach, Cole Mercer made the only choice that mattered. He stayed. Dawn broke gray and cold, the kind of October morning that tasted like ash and felt like a promise being broken. Cole woke to the sound of hammering, the final adjustments to the gallows, he figured, and the certainty that this was probably his last sunrise. The knowledge sat heavy in his chest, but it didn't terrify him the way he'd expected. 20 years on the frontier had taught him that death was just another card in the deck, and eventually everyone's hand ran out. Grafton appeared around 7 with weak coffee and stale bread. The deputy's eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking slightly, and he wouldn't meet Cole's gaze when he shoved the tin plate through the bars. "You got about 5 hours left," Grafton muttered. "Hanging set for noon. Judge wants it done public so the whole town can watch." Thoughtful of him. "You got any last requests? Anyone you want to see?" Cole thought about asking for Barrett, but the marshal was still out at Talbot's mining camp as far as anyone knew, chasing evidence that might arrive too late to matter. "No, just get it over with when the time comes. Don't make it a spectacle." Grafton almost looked sympathetic. Almost. "It's already a spectacle, Mercer. Been selling standing room tickets since yesterday. Talbot's hosting a reception afterward at the Grand Hotel. Half the territory's turned your execution into a social event." Cole's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. What was there to say? He'd known from the moment the verdict came down that this was how it would end, not with justice or mercy, but with theater and profit and powerful men celebrating the removal of an inconvenient obstacle. The deputy left, and Cole sat on the cot, listening to the town wake up around him. Voices in the street, growing louder as people arrived to watch him hang. The rattle of wagon wheels bringing families in from outlying farms. The excited chatter of children who'd been given the day off school to witness frontier justice in action. Around 9 o'clock, the outer door opened again. This time it was Judge Thorne himself, dressed in formal black like he was attending a funeral. 2 armed guards flanked him, their hands resting on their pistols. "Mr. Mercer," Thorne said, his voice carrying that same cold authority it had held during the trial, "I wanted to personally inform you that your execution will proceed as scheduled. The territorial marshal's stay has been overturned by emergency order, and all legal avenues for appeal have been exhausted." Cole stood slowly. "Barrett finds something you didn't like, Judge?" Thorne's face remained impassive. Marshal Barrett exceeded his authority and interfered with local jurisdiction. His so-called investigation turned up nothing but wild theories and circumstantial nonsense. This court stands by its verdict. Even though the bullet that killed Jimmy Dalton came from a .41 caliber weapon and I carry a .44? Something flickered in Thorne's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or concern that Cole knew details he shouldn't. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Barrett dug up Dalton's body, found the bullet, had it measured. "It doesn't match my gun, Judge, which means either I didn't fire the shot that killed him, or someone's been lying about what happened that night." Thorne's hands tightened on the papers he was holding. The marshal had no legal authority to exhume that body. Any evidence he claims to have found is inadmissible. Funny how evidence becomes inadmissible when it contradicts the story you're trying to sell. Careful, Mr. Mercer. You're already condemned. Don't make your last hours more unpleasant than they need to be. Cole stepped closer to the bars. You know I didn't murder that kid. You've known it from the start. But Talbot owns you, same as he owns half this town, and you'd rather see an innocent man hang than risk losing whatever leverage he's got on you. Thorne's face went pale, then flushed red. You will show respect for this court. This isn't a court. It's a lynch mob dressed up in legal robes. And when Barrett finally gets back to town with enough evidence to prove it, everyone's going to know exactly what you are. Marshal Barrett won't be returning to town, Thorne said coldly. He's been recalled to Helena on urgent territorial business. By the time he completes his current assignment, your execution will be long over and this matter will be closed. The words hit like a fist to the gut. Barrett recalled. Pulled off the investigation just when he was getting close to proof, which meant Talbot had reached someone higher up the chain, someone with enough authority to yank a territorial marshal out of the field and leave Cole to hang without interference. Cole forced himself to keep his voice steady. How much did that cost him? I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying that Talbot just bought himself a territorial recall order the same way he bought your verdict and Kinsey's prosecution. Money talks loud out here, doesn't it, Judge? Loud enough to drown out things like truth and justice and innocent men screaming from the gallows. Thorne turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Mr. Mercer, I almost believe you didn't pull the trigger. But it doesn't matter. Someone had to answer for James Dalton's death, and you were convenient. That's how the frontier works. That's how it's always worked. He walked away, leaving Cole alone with the guards and the cold certainty that the last thread of hope had just been cut. The morning ground on with brutal slowness. Cole paced the cell, his mind working through scenarios that all ended the same way, with a rope and a drop, and the snapping sound that meant everything was over. He thought about running, even now. The cell door was still unlocked from Garfield's visit. The guards were outside, not inside. If he moved fast enough, if he caught them by surprise, he might make it to the street. But the town square would be packed with people waiting for the execution. There'd be nowhere to run except into a crowd that wanted him dead. And even if he somehow fought through them, stole a horse, and made it out of town, he'd spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, waiting for the law or Talbot's hired guns to catch up. No. If this was the end, he'd face it standing still. Let them come to him. Let them work for it. Around 11 o'clock, Peter Garfield appeared, looking like he hadn't slept. His suit was rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed, and he carried a leather satchel that seemed too heavy for its size. Mr. Mercer, he said quietly. I'm sorry. I tried everything. Filed emergency appeals with 3 different territorial judges, sent telegrams to the governor's office, even contacted a newspaper in Helena. Nothing worked. Talbot's got this thing locked down tight. I know. Judge Thorne came by to gloat earlier. Garfield's hands tightened on the satchel. There's one more thing I can try. It's desperate and probably illegal, but no more heroics, counselor. You've done enough, more than enough. I won't let you destroy your career trying to save a dead man. You're not dead yet. Give it an hour. Garfield set the satchel down and gripped the bars. I don't accept that. I can't. If I let you hang knowing you're innocent, knowing this whole trial was rigged from the start, then what the hell am I even doing calling myself a lawyer? Cole felt something tighten in his throat. You're doing what you can in a system that's broken. That's all anyone can do. It's not enough. It's going to have to be. The young lawyer's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I wanted to win this case. Not for the glory or the reputation. I wanted to win because it was the right thing, because you deserved better than this. We all deserve better than we get. That's the frontier for you. Garfield pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. Miss Quinn sent this. Telegram from Helena. Arrived this morning. Cole took the envelope with hands that trembled slightly. He opened it and read the brief message scrawled on the yellow paper. Cole. Barrett found Riley alive, hiding at mining camp, gave full confession. Talbot paid him to shoot Dalton and frame you. Marshall writing back with witness, hold on, Mara. The words blurred and then sharpened. Cole read them twice, his heart hammering against his ribs. Riley alive. Confession obtained. Barrett writing back with a witness who could blow Talbot's entire conspiracy wide open. When did this arrive? Cole demanded. An hour ago. I tried to get it to Judge Thorne, but he refused to see me, said he wouldn't entertain any more delays. Cole looked at the clock on the wall. 11:15. 45 minutes until the hanging. How far is the mining camp? 2 hours by hard riding. Then Barrett won't make it in time. Not unless someone stalls the execution. Cole met Garfield's eyes. You can't stall a hanging, counselor. Not when the judge has already made up his mind. Maybe I can't. But there's someone in this town who might be able to. Before Cole could ask who, Garfield grabbed the satchel and hurried out of the cell block. His footsteps echoed down the corridor, fading into the sounds of the gathering crowd outside. Cole stared at the telegram, reading Mara's words one more time. She hadn't run. Hadn't disappeared into the Eastern Territories like he'd told her to. Instead, she'd stayed close enough to coordinate with Barrett, close enough to send this message, close enough to fight for him even when everyone else had given up. The realization hit him like a gut punch. She'd never intended to abandon him. The whole story about San Francisco had been misdirection, a way to protect herself while she worked behind the scenes to find the evidence that could save him. He'd underestimated her. Again. At 11:30, Grafton appeared with 2 other deputies. Time to go, Mercer. Cole stood, straightening his shirt. Lead the way. They clamped irons on his wrists and ankles, the chains heavy and cold. The walk from the cell to the outer door felt longer than it should have, each step echoing in the narrow corridor like a countdown. When they opened the door to the street, the noise hit him like a physical wave. Hundreds of people packed the town square. Men, women, children, all pressed together to get a view of the gallows that stood in the center like a stage. The platform was new pine, still smelling of sawdust and fresh-cut lumber. The rope dangled from the crossbeam, the noose already tied, the knot thick and professional. Someone in the crowd shouted, "There he is!" And the noise swelled, jeers, curses, a few scattered cheers from people who'd lost money at his tables and were happy to see him pay for it. Cole kept his eyes forward, his face blank. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing fear. If this was how it ended, he'd go out the same way he'd lived, on his feet, meeting the world's cruelty with cold defiance. They marched him through the crowd, deputies forming a wedge to keep the mob from getting too close. Someone threw a rotten apple that splattered against Cole's shoulder. Another person spat. A woman screamed that he was a murderer and deserved worse than hanging. Cole ignored them all. His eyes scanned the crowd, looking for Barrett's tall frame, or Garfield's rumpled suit, or any sign that the marshal had made it back in time. But there was nothing, just faces twisted with excitement and righteousness, and the peculiar bloodlust that came from watching someone else's suffering. They reached the gallows steps. Grafton shoved him forward, and Cole climbed slowly, the chains rattling with each movement. At the top, Judge Thorne waited, flanked by Edwin Talbot and the hangman, a squat, thick-shouldered man who looked like he'd done this enough times to be bored by it. "Cole Mercer," Thorne intoned, his voice carrying over the crowd, "you have been tried and convicted of the murder of James William Dalton. The sentence of this court is death by hanging. Do you have any last words?" Cole looked out over the crowd, seeing nothing but hungry faces and raised fists. Then his eyes caught movement at the back of the square, a horse thundering up the street, the rider bent low over the saddle, riding like the devil himself was giving chase. Marshal Wade Barrett. But he was too far away. 200 yards at least. Even if he drove the horse straight through the crowd, he wouldn't reach the gallows before the hangman pulled the lever. Cole made his choice in an instant. "I've got words, Judge," he said loudly. "Question is whether you've got the stones to hear them." Thorne's face darkened. "This is not the time for—" "You said I could speak, so shut your mouth and let me speak." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Thorne hesitated, clearly torn between maintaining the appearance of legal propriety and shutting Cole up before he could cause more trouble. Cole didn't wait for permission. "My name is Cole Mercer, and I didn't murder anyone. James Dalton was shot by a man named Thomas Riley on orders from Edwin Talbot, who wanted my property and figured framing me for murder was cheaper than buying me out." Talbot surged forward. "This is slander. Judge, stop him." "I've got evidence," Cole shouted over him. "Marshal Barrett's got a witness. Riley confessed to the whole thing. Talbot paid him to shoot Dalton and plant the gun where it would implicate me." That's why the bullet caliber didn't match my weapon. That's why the angle was wrong. That's why this whole trial was a farce from start to finish." The crowd erupted into chaos. Some people shouted for Cole to hang anyway. Others demanded to hear the evidence. Judge Thorne pounded his gavel uselessly, his voice lost in the noise. And through it all, Barrett rode closer, his horse scattering people like wheat before a scythe. "Hang him!" Talbot screamed. "Hang him now before this gets out of hand!" The hangman moved toward the lever. Cole felt rough hands push him toward the trap door, felt the noose slip around his neck, the rope rough against his skin. Barrett was 100 yards away. 75, 50. "Stop!" A new voice cut through the chaos, clear, furious, and unmistakably female. The crowd parted, and Mara Quinn strode through like an avenging angel, her face set with determination, and a derringer in her hand pointed straight at the hangman. "You pull that lever, and I'll put a bullet in your brain," she said calmly. "Judge, you better listen to what the marshal has to say, because if Cole Mercer hangs today, I'm going to make damn sure everyone in this territory knows you executed an innocent man to cover up Edwin Talbot's crimes." The hangman froze, his hand hovering over the lever. Barrett's horse skidded to a stop at the base of the gallows. The marshal vaulted from the saddle, dragging a terrified-looking Thomas Riley with him. "Judge Thorne," Barrett bellowed, "I've got a witness who'll testify that Edwin Talbot hired him to murder James Dalton and frame Cole Mercer. I'm invoking territorial authority to stop this execution pending a full investigation." Thorne looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Marshal, your authority was revoked, reinstated an hour ago by direct order of the territorial governor." Barrett pulled a document from his coat and thrust it toward the judge. "Read it yourself. I've got jurisdiction to investigate this case, and I'm ordering you to release the prisoner immediately." For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. The crowd held its breath. The hangman's hand stayed frozen over the lever. Mara's gun didn't waver from its target. Then Talbot made his move. He lunged for the hangman, shouting, "Do it! Hang him now!" But Mara was faster. She shifted her aim and fired, the derringer's sharp crack cutting through the silence. The bullet slammed into the wooden lever, splintering it into useless fragments. The crowd erupted. Some people surged toward the gallows, shouting for justice. Others ran, not wanting to be caught in whatever violence was about to unfold. Deputies drew their weapons, unsure who to point them at. Barrett grabbed Riley and hauled him onto the platform. "Tell them," he roared. "Tell them what you told me." Riley's face was white with terror. I shot Dalton. Mr. Talbot paid me $500 to do it. Said it had to look like Mercer did it, so I took his spare gun from behind the bar and waited on the roof across from the saloon. When Dalton came outside and started the fight like Talbot told him to, I fired, clean shot through the heart. "Liar," Talbot screamed. "He's lying. The marshal coerced him." "I've got the murder weapon," Barrett shouted back. Riley kept it hidden at the mining camp, 41 caliber Derringer, exactly matching the bullet I recovered from Dalton's corpse. And I've got 3 witnesses who saw Talbot pay Riley the blood money. The crowd's mood was shifting now, ugly confusion turning into something sharper. People who'd been screaming for Cole's death were now looking at Talbot with suspicion. The mob's hunger for justice didn't care who it devoured, as long as someone paid. Judge Thorne stood frozen, clearly calculating which way the wind was blowing. "Marshal Barrett," he said slowly, "if what you're saying is true, it's true, and you're going to release Cole Mercer right now, or I'm arresting you for conspiracy to commit judicial murder." Thorne swallowed hard, then nodded to the hangman. "Remove the noose." The rough hemp slipped from Cole's neck. His chains were unlocked, and for the first time in weeks he could breathe without feeling the weight of a rope pressing against his throat. Grafton appeared at his elbow, supporting him as he stumbled down the gallows steps. At the bottom, Mara was waiting, her derringer tucked away, her face composed but her eyes bright with relief. "Told you to hold on," she said quietly. Cole laughed, the sound ragged and raw. "You're supposed to be in San Francisco." "Changed my mind. Turns out watching you hang wasn't on my list of things to do before I died." Barrett was shouting orders to his deputies, directing them to arrest Talbot and secure Riley as a witness. The mining magnate was protesting loudly, demanding lawyers and threatening lawsuits, but his voice was getting drowned out by the crowd's rising anger. Someone threw a rock that caught Talbot in the shoulder. Someone else surged forward with a rope, shouting about frontier justice. The same mob that had come to watch Cole hang was now turning its bloodlust toward the man who'd orchestrated the whole thing. Barrett fired his pistol into the air. "Everyone back! This man will stand trial, same as anyone. We're not a lynch mob." It took 20 minutes to restore order. Deputies formed a cordon around Talbot and Riley, protecting them from the crowd, while Barrett organized their transport to a more secure location. Judge Thorne disappeared into the courthouse, looking like a man who'd just realized his career was over. And through it all, Cole stood at the base of the gallows with Mara beside him, watching the chaos unfold with the numb disbelief of someone who'd just been pulled back from the edge of oblivion. Peter Garfield found them in the confusion. "Mr. Mercer, I've already started drafting a motion to vacate your conviction. With Riley's confession and the physical evidence, we should have you fully exonerated within a week." "Thank you," Cole said, his voice hoarse, "for everything. Thank Miss Quinn. She's the one who refused to give up, tracked down Riley's location, convinced Barrett to push harder, even came back to town when she could have been safely on a train heading east." Garfield smiled. "You've got good people fighting for you, Mr. Mercer. Don't forget that." The young lawyer moved off to deal with the legal aftermath, leaving Cole and Mara standing together in the thinning crowd. "Why'd you come back?" Cole asked quietly. "You were free, safe. You could have started over anywhere." Mara looked up at him, her whiskey-colored eyes steady. "Because you're an idiot who doesn't know when to fold a losing hand. Someone had to make sure you survived long enough to realize you were playing the wrong game." "I thought I was protecting you." "I know. That's what makes you an idiot." She smiled, small and sad. "But you're my idiot, and I wasn't about to let Talbot murder you just because it was more convenient than fighting fair." Cole felt something crack open in his chest, relief, gratitude, and something deeper that he didn't have words for. "I don't deserve you." "No, you don't, but you're stuck with me anyway." Barrett approached, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to need you to give a formal statement about the events of October 14th. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" "I'll be there." "Good. And Miss Quinn, I'll need your testimony as well. The more evidence we have against Talbot, the harder it'll be for his lawyers to wriggle him out of this." Mara nodded. "Whatever you need, Marshal." Barrett tipped his hat. "You two should get somewhere safe. Talbot's got friends in this town, and some of them might not be happy about how this turned out. Stay low until the dust settles." He left to oversee the prisoner transport, and Cole and Mara stood alone in the emptying square, the gallows looming behind them like a bad dream. "Come on," Mara said, taking his arm. "Let's go home." They walked through the quiet streets toward the Silver Dollar, passing boarded-up shops and suspicious faces. The town that had been ready to celebrate Cole's execution was now uncertain what to think, caught between relief that justice might actually prevail and resentment that the entertainment had been canceled. The saloon was dark when they arrived, the doors locked, the windows shuttered. Mara produced a key and let them in, and the familiar smell of whiskey and sawdust hit Cole like a homecoming. Nothing had changed. The faro tables stood empty, cards scattered where they'd been abandoned. The bar was dusty but intact. His office door hung slightly open, revealing the desk and ledgers and all the small evidences of a life interrupted. "Thought Talbot would have seized this place by now," Cole said. "He tried. I had Garfield file an injunction. Bought us a few weeks at least." Mara moved behind the bar, pulling down a bottle of decent whiskey and 2 glasses. "Figured if you survived, you'd want something to come back to." She poured generous measures and slid one across to Cole. He took it, feeling the weight of the glass in his hand, solid and real and proof that he was still alive. "To survival," Mara said, raising her glass. "To people stubborn enough to fight for it," Cole replied. They drank, the whiskey burning clean and sharp down his throat. Outside, the town was settling into uncertain evening, not sure whether to mourn the lost spectacle or celebrate the unexpected reprieve. Inside the Silver Dollar, 2 survivors sat together in the gathering dark, surrounded by the wreckage of a rigged game they'd somehow managed to beat. And for the first time in months, Cole Mercer allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the frontier hadn't won after all. The whiskey sat between them like a peace treaty neither of them had signed yet. Cole poured a second glass while Mara lit the oil lamps one by one, bringing the silver dollar back to life in gradual increments of amber light. The saloon looked smaller than he remembered, shabbier, the kind of place that survived on stubbornness rather than prosperity. But it was his, and that still meant something. "How long before Talbot's lawyers get him out?" Cole asked, watching the whiskey catch the lamplight. Mara settled onto the stool across from him. "Barrett says with Riley's confession and the physical evidence, Talbot's looking at murder conspiracy charges. Even the best lawyers in Helena can't make that disappear overnight. But they can make it expensive, drag it out, turn it into a war of attrition where the side with more money wins. Probably, but Barrett's not backing down, says he's tired of watching rich men buy their way out of consequences." She studied him over the rim of her glass. "You look like hell, by the way." "Feel worse." Cole touched his neck where the noose had been, the skin still raw from rough hemp. "Thought I was dead. Had made my peace with it." "I know you had. That's what scared me most." Mara's voice was quiet but sharp, like a blade wrapped in velvet. "You were ready to give up. Let them hang you just to prove some point about not running." "Wasn't about proving anything. Just didn't see a way out that didn't cost someone else everything." "So you were going to cost yourself everything instead?" "That's not noble, Cole. That's just stupid pride wearing a martyr's mask." He met her eyes, seeing the anger there mixed with relief, and something that might have been fear if Mara Quinn ever admitted to being afraid. "You could have walked away, should have walked away." "And let you hang for a murder you didn't commit? Let Talbot win?" She shook her head. "I've spent 6 years watching you survive things that would kill most men. Wasn't about to watch you throw it away because you'd decided you weren't worth saving." The words landed like punches, each one true enough to hurt. Cole drained his glass and set it down carefully, the sound loud in the quiet saloon. "Why'd you really come back, Mara? And don't tell me it was just about justice or stopping Talbot. I need the truth." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the bar's worn surface. When she spoke, her voice had lost its edge, replaced by something raw. "Because in 6 years of dealing cards in frontier hellholes, you're the only person who ever treated me like I was worth more than what men usually want from women in saloons. You gave me work when everyone else saw a ruined woman with no prospects. You split profits fair, never asked for anything I didn't offer, and you trusted me to run your best table when most men wouldn't trust a woman to pour whiskey without supervision." She looked up, and her eyes were bright but steady. "So when they tried to destroy you with the same kind of lies that destroyed me in Virginia City, I couldn't just walk away. Because if I did, I'd be admitting that decent treatment doesn't matter. That loyalty is just another commodity to be bought and sold. And I'm not ready to believe that yet." Cole felt something shift in his chest, a weight he'd been carrying so long he'd forgotten it was there. "You're the best thing that ever happened to this place. You know that, right? I'm the best card dealer you ever hired. There's a difference." "No, there's not." He poured them both another measure. "When this is over, when Talbot's locked up and the trial's finished, I want to sign the silver dollar over to you. Make it legal. Make it yours." Mara's hand froze halfway to her glass. "What?" "I'm serious. This place should belong to someone who'll actually make something of it. Someone who sees it as more than just a profitable piece of land sitting on water rights." "Cole, I'm done with it, Mara. Done with the frontier, done with the cards, done with watching my back every second waiting for the next claim jumper or rigged trial. I've been running for 20 years, and I'm tired. But you've got something I never had. You've got a vision for what this place could be, so take it. Build something that matters." She stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. "You're just going to give me a saloon? After everything that just happened, you're making business decisions?" "Clearest thinking I've done in months." Cole smiled, tired but genuine. "Besides, I figure I owe you for saving my life. Seems like a fair trade." "You don't owe me anything. I owe you everything. So let me do this one decent thing before I ride out of here and never look back." Mara's face worked through several emotions: disbelief, suspicion, hope, and finally something that looked like acceptance. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere nobody knows my name or cares about my past. Maybe California, maybe Oregon. Somewhere I can disappear and not worry about who's coming to kill me next." "That doesn't sound like you." "Maybe I'm tired of being me." They sat with that for a while, drinking in comfortable silence while the lamps burned and the night settled over the town like a blanket. Outside, voices drifted past, people heading home from the excitement, probably still debating whether Cole Mercer was a murderer or a victim, or something in between that the frontier didn't have a name for. Around midnight, someone knocked on the saloon door. Cole tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward where his gun would have been if he'd still had one. Mara stood and moved to the window, peering through a gap in the shutters. "It's Garfield," she said, unlocking the door. The young lawyer stepped inside, carrying his omnipresent satchel and wearing the expression of someone who'd just survived a hurricane. "Sorry to intrude, but I thought you'd want to know. Judge Thorne resigned an hour ago, effective immediately." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Someone force his hand?" Marshall Barrett found financial records linking Thorne to Talbot's mining operation. Turns out the judge owned shares in the company through a shell corporation. When the scandal broke, he didn't have much choice but to step down before someone filed ethics charges. "How many other people were involved?" Mara asked. "Half the town, from what Barrett's uncovered so far. Talbot had his fingers in everything: land deals, mining claims, water rights, even the assay office. He'd been systematically buying up influence for years, and anyone who wouldn't play along got pushed out or destroyed." Garfield set his satchel on the bar. "Your trial was just the most visible example, but there were dozens of smaller cases where Talbot manipulated the system to get what he wanted." Cole thought about that. All the people who'd been ruined quietly, without the spectacle of a public hanging. Families who'd lost land to dubious claims. Prospectors who'd been driven out by legal technicalities. Women like Mara, who'd seen their reputations destroyed and their livelihoods stolen. What happens to them now? Barrett's recommending a territorial investigation. Could take months, maybe years, but at least people will know the truth. Garfield pulled documents from his satchel. "Speaking of truth, I brought the paperwork for your exoneration. All you need to do is sign, and your conviction gets officially vacated." Cole took the papers and scanned them. Legal language, dense and formal, but the meaning was clear. The territory was admitting they'd nearly hanged an innocent man, and they were willing to say so in writing. It should have felt like vindication. Victory. Justice finally served. Instead, it just felt hollow. "What about Dalton's family?" Cole asked quietly. "They got any idea their son was murdered as part of a conspiracy?" Garfield's face fell. "I tracked down his next of kin, mother living in St. Louis. I sent her a telegram explaining what happened. She deserves to know the truth." "She deserves more than truth. She deserves restitution." Cole signed the papers and pushed them back across the bar. "When you settle my legal bills, make sure there's money left over for Dalton's mother. Call it blood money or conscience money or whatever makes it legal. I don't care. Just make sure she gets it." "How much?" "Whatever I've got left after paying you and settling debts. All of it." Mara started to protest, but Cole cut her off. "That kid died because he was desperate enough to take Talbot's money. Maybe he thought it was just a harmless con, or maybe he knew exactly what he was walking into and did it anyway. Either way, his mother lost a son. Least I can do is make sure she's not destitute because of it." Garfield nodded slowly. "I'll drop the transfer documents tomorrow." After the lawyer left, Mara poured them both another drink. "You're giving away everything. The saloon to me, your savings to Dalton's mother. What are you going to live on?" "I'll figure it out. Always have." Cole sipped his whiskey, feeling the burn settle into something almost comfortable. Money's easy to come by if you're willing to work for it. Peace of mind's harder. "And you think giving everything away will buy you peace?" "I think holding on to things hasn't bought me anything except trouble. So maybe it's time to try something different." They drank in silence until the bottle was half empty and the lamps were burning low. Somewhere around 2 a.m, Mara stood and stretched, her spine cracking audibly. "I'm going to bed. You should too. Barrett wants statements from both of us tomorrow, and you look like you're about to fall over." Cole nodded. "I'll lock up." She paused at the foot of the stairs. "Cole? Thank you for the saloon, for trusting me with it. I won't let you down." "I know you won't. That's why I'm giving it to you." She disappeared upstairs, her footsteps creaking on the old boards. Cole sat alone in this quiet saloon surrounded by empty tables and flickering lamplight, and the ghosts of 6 years spent surviving in a place that chewed people up and spit them out. He thought about Jimmy Dalton, dying in the street for $500 and a promise. About Thomas Riley, hiding in a mining camp with blood on his hands and terror in his eyes. About Judge Thorne selling his authority to the highest bidder and calling it frontier justice. About all the small betrayals and casual cruelties that made the West what it was, a place where power mattered more than truth and money bought everything except actual decency. And he thought about Mara, who'd survived Virginia City and a ruined reputation in 6 years dealing cards in a crooked saloon, and who'd still found enough courage to fight for someone else when she could have walked away clean. If the frontier produced anything worth saving, it was people like her. People who'd been broken and rebuilt themselves harder. People who knew the world's cruelty firsthand and chose kindness anyway. Cole locked the doors, checked the windows, and climbed the stairs to his room. It looked exactly as he'd left it weeks ago. Narrow bed, battered dresser, a single chair by the window. The cell had been more comfortable, in a way. At least there he'd known exactly how much space he had and what the boundaries were. He lay down without undressing and stared at the ceiling, listening to the building settle around him. Tomorrow he'd give his statement to Barrett. Sign the legal papers Garfield prepared. Start the process of transferring ownership of the silver dollar to Mara. Begin dismantling the life he'd built here piece by piece until nothing remained except memories and the knowledge that he'd survived longer than anyone expected. Sleep came eventually, restless and dreamless. And when he woke, the sun was already high and someone was pounding on the downstairs door hard enough to rattle the frame. Cole grabbed his boots and stumbled downstairs, half expecting trouble. But when Mara opened the door, it was Marshal Barrett standing there with news written across his face. "Talbot's dead," Barrett said without preamble. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Cole felt something cold settle in his stomach. How? Hung himself in his cell last night, used his belt. Guard found him around dawn. Barrett looked grim. Left a confession. Full details about the conspiracy, the bribery, the murder, names, dates, amounts paid, enough to implicate half the territorial government. Mara crossed her arms. Convenient timing. Too convenient. I think someone got to him, convinced him that dying quiet was better than living through the scandal and trial. Barrett pulled a folded paper from his coat. But he signed it in front of witnesses before he did it, so it's legally binding. Cole took the confession and read it slowly. Talbot's handwriting, shaky but legible, detailing everything, how he'd hired Riley to kill Dalton, how he'd bribed Judge Thorne and bought witnesses and paid Prosecutor Kinsey's fee, how he'd orchestrated the entire trial to seize the silver dollar and its water rights. It was all there, every sordid detail, wrapped up in legal language and signed at the bottom. "What happens now?" Cole asked. Territorial governors ordered a full investigation. Every case Thorne presided over gets reviewed. Every land deal Talbot touched gets examined. It's going to tear this town apart. Barrett's jaw tightened. But at least the truth's out. That's worth something. Is it? Mara's voice was sharp. Talbot's dead. Thorne's resigned. Riley will probably get a reduced sentence for cooperating. And the people who actually suffered, the families who lost land, the prospectors who got cheated, the women whose reputations got destroyed, they're still broken. The truth doesn't fix that. Barrett met her eyes. No, but it's a start, and sometimes that's all we get. He left the confession with them and headed back to coordinate the investigation. Cole and Mara stood in the doorway, watching the marshal disappear down the street, the paper heavy in Cole's hands. "He's right," Cole said quietly. "It's not enough, but it's something." Over the next week, the town transformed. News of Talbot's confession spread through the territory like wildfire, bringing reporters from Helena and Butte, and even as far as San Francisco. The story of the rigged trial and the mining magnates' conspiracy became front-page news, complete with lurid details and moral outrage from people who'd never cared about frontier justice before. Peter Garfield became briefly famous, giving interviews about his fight to save an innocent man from the gallows. Marshal Barrett received commendations from the territorial office and offers from newspapers to write his memoirs. And Cole Mercer found himself in the strange position of being celebrated as a victim instead of condemned as a villain. He hated every minute of it. The attention, the sympathy, the people who suddenly wanted to buy him drinks and shake his hand and tell him how brave he'd been. It all felt like a performance he hadn't auditioned for. He'd survived because he was too stubborn to die and too lucky to hang. Nothing about it was heroic. Nothing about it deserved celebration. So he kept his head down and focused on the practical work of transferring ownership of the silver dollar to Mara. Garfield handled the legal paperwork, drawing up deeds and contracts that would stand up to scrutiny. Cole signed everything without reading it too closely, trusting the young lawyer to handle the details. When the final papers were ready, they gathered in the saloon, Cole, Mara, Garfield, and Marshall Barrett as witness. The signing took less than 5 minutes. Cole's signature on one line, Mara's on another, and suddenly the silver dollar belonged to someone who'd actually appreciate it. "Congratulations," Cole said, shaking Mara's hand formally. "You're now the proud owner of the finest crooked gambling establishment in the Montana Territory." Mara's smile was complicated, happy and sad and everything in between. "What are you going to do now?" "Pack my things, settle my debts, disappear before the next reporter shows up asking me to relive the worst month of my life for public entertainment." "Where will you go?" Cole had been thinking about that question for days, turning it over like a card he was trying to read. "There's a place in Oregon I heard about. Small town on the coast. Supposed to be quiet. Respectable. The kind of place where nobody cares what you did before as long as you keep your head down and don't cause trouble." "Sounds boring. Sounds perfect." Barrett stepped forward, extending his hand. "Mr. Mercer, it's been an honor. You're a hell of a lot tougher than you look." Cole shook it. "And you're a better lawman than this territory deserves, Marshall. Don't let them grind you down." "I'll try. And if you ever need anything, witness protection, character reference, help starting over somewhere new, you let me know. As far as I'm concerned, the territory owes you a debt it can't repay. Just make sure the investigation doesn't die with Talbot. People need to know the system was broken so they can fix it." "You have my word." Garfield was next, his handshake firm despite the youth in his face. "Thank you for trusting me, Mr. Mercer. This case, it reminded me why I became a lawyer in the first place." "You did good work, counselor. Better than I deserved." Cole pulled an envelope from his pocket. "This is for you. Payment for services rendered, plus a little extra for the risks you took." Garfield opened the envelope and went pale. "This is too much." "It's exactly right. You stood up to a corrupt judge and a bought prosecutor because you believed in something bigger than your career. That kind of integrity is rare. Don't lose it." The young lawyer's eyes were bright. "I won't, I promise." After they left, Cole and Mara stood alone in the saloon one last time. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, painting everything in amber and shadow. It looked the same as it always had, worn and tired and somehow still standing despite everything trying to knock it down. "You're really leaving," Mara said quietly. "I'm really leaving." "When?" "Tomorrow morning. Stage to Helena, then west from there." She nodded slowly, her face carefully neutral. "I'll miss you. The saloon won't be the same without you scowling at customers and calculating odds in your head. You'll do fine without me. Better, probably. You actually like people. I just tolerated them long enough to take their money." "That's not true. You cared about this place, about the people who worked here. You just didn't want anyone to know it." Cole smiled despite himself. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just good at pretending." Mara moved behind the bar and pulled out a small wooden box. "I have something for you. Was going to save it for when you left, but now seems right." She opened the box, revealing a deck of cards. Not new ones. These were worn, the edges soft from use, the faces slightly faded. Cole recognized them immediately. "These are for my first night dealing here," Mara said. "You let me run the high-stakes table even though I'd just walked in off the street with nothing but a carpet bag and an attitude. These cards paid my first week's wages. Figured you should have them. Reminder that sometimes taking risks on people pays off." Cole took the deck, feeling the familiar weight and texture. "I'll keep them. Use them to fleece respectable Oregon citizens out of their poker money." "Good. They'll never see you coming." They stood there in the quiet saloon, the deck of cards between them, like a promise that some things survived, no matter how hard the frontier tried to destroy them. That night, Cole packed what little he owned: 2 changes of clothes, a shaving kit, the deck of cards Mara had given him, and the telegram she'd sent when everything seemed hopeless. He left behind the desk, the ledgers, the furniture, all the accumulated debris of 6 years surviving in a place that didn't want him. He slept poorly, waking several times to the sound of wind rattling the shutters and the certain knowledge that he'd never sleep in this room again. When dawn finally came, he was already dressed and ready, his single bag packed and waiting by the door. Mara was in the kitchen when he came downstairs, making coffee that smelled like hope and tasted like goodbye. They drank it standing up, neither of them wanting to drag this out longer than necessary. "The stage leaves at 8, Cole said. "I know. You'll change the locks after I'm gone?" "Already ordered new ones." "And you'll hire someone to fix that board on the balcony before someone falls through?" "Cole," Mara set her cup down. "I know how to run a saloon. Stop worrying." "Can't help it. Old habits." She smiled, sad and genuine. "I'm going to turn this place into something you'd be proud of. Something that proves the frontier can build things instead of just tearing them down." "You already did that. The day you decided I was worth saving." Mara's eyes were bright, but she blinked the tears away before they could fall. "Get out of here before I change my mind about letting you leave." Cole picked up his bag and headed for the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back one last time at the saloon that had been his home and his prison and his refuge all at once. Mara stood behind the bar, framed by bottles and lamplight, looking like she belonged there in a way he never had. "Take care of yourself, Mara Quinn. You too, Cole Mercer, and don't be a stranger. Oregon's not that far." He walked out into the cold October morning, closing the door behind him with a quiet click that felt like the end of a chapter he'd been writing for too long. The street was empty, the town still sleeping off the excitement and scandal of the past weeks. Cole walked to the stage depot, bought his ticket, and climbed aboard when the driver called for passengers. As the stage pulled away from the town, Cole looked out the window one last time. The Silver Dollar stood dark and solid in the morning light, smoke rising from its chimney. The gallows had been dismantled, the lumber repurposed for less sinister construction. The courthouse looked smaller somehow, its authority diminished by the scandal that had gutted it from within. And somewhere in that tangle of buildings and dirt streets and frontier dreams, Mara Quinn was probably already opening the saloon for the day's business, dealing cards with the precision and grace that had kept her alive through 6 years of hardship. Cole settled back in his seat and pulled out the worn deck of cards, shuffling them idly. A merchant across from him watched with interest. "You play?" the merchant asked. Cole smiled. "Used to. Gave it up recently." "Shame. You handle those cards like a professional." "That's because I was one. But I'm done with that life now. Heading somewhere quiet to start over." "Good for you. Fresh starts are what the West is for." Cole thought about that as the stage carried him away from the town that had nearly killed him and toward a future that was blank and uncertain and entirely his to write. Fresh starts, new beginnings. New, the chance to be someone other than the sharp-edged survivor who'd lived by cards and luck, and the willingness to do whatever it took to keep breathing. Maybe Oregon would be different. Maybe he could build something there that wasn't founded on violence and desperation. Maybe he could find a version of himself that wasn't defined by the people he'd outlasted and the games he'd won. Or maybe the frontier was in his blood too deep to ever wash out, and he'd carry it with him wherever he went, the wariness, the calculation, the bone-deep knowledge that the world was cruel and survival meant being crueler. Either way, he was done trying to answer that question in a town that had already decided who he was and what he deserved. The stage rolled on through the morning, carrying Cole away from his past and toward whatever came next. Behind him, the town dwindled to a smudge on the horizon, then vanished entirely as the road curved into new territory. Cole pocketed the cards and closed his eyes, feeling the rhythm of wheels on a rough road. For the first time in 20 years, he had no plan, no angle, no scheme for staying one step ahead of whatever was coming. He was just a man on a stage heading west, with empty pockets and a clear conscience, and the strange, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still room in this brutal world for something other than survival. The Montana Territory fell away behind him, mile by mile, taking its violence and its corruption and its broken justice with it. And Cole Mercer, who'd survived a rigged trial and a rope and the systematic destruction of everything he'd built, rode toward the coast with nothing but the clothes on his back and the knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was let go. In the town he'd left behind, Mara Quinn stood behind the bar of the Silver Dollar and dealt the first hand of cards in her new establishment. The morning light streamed through the windows, painting everything in gold, and for just a moment she let herself imagine what this place could become. Not just a saloon, but a refuge. A place where broken people could find decent work and fair treatment. A place that proved the frontier didn't have to devour everyone who tried to make a life in its harsh embrace. She dealt the cards with steady hands, her face composed, her whiskey-colored eyes sharp and clear. Outside, the town was waking up to a new reality. One where corruption had been exposed and justice, however imperfect, had finally shown its face. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't even close to fair recompense for all the damage that had been done. But it was a start, a foundation to build on, a crack in the armor of cynicism that said the frontier only rewarded the ruthless and left everyone else to die. And as the morning customers began trickling in, drawn by the smell of fresh coffee and the promise of honest games, Mara Quinn allowed herself a small smile. Cole had given her more than a saloon. He'd given her proof that even in the hardest places, even when the odds were stacked impossible and the game was rigged beyond redemption, there were still people who chose kindness over cruelty, loyalty over survival, and truth over convenient lies. That knowledge was worth more than any deed or property or pile of winnings. It was worth everything.